You're listening to the Valley Current.
I've used so many different programs, and I'll tell you what, Zoom by far is, now I know why they're so popular, right? I was just on a Zoom, a call with, I think it was Google Teams, and I've done Microsoft Teams or Google this, Google, and I by far think Zoom's the easiest to navigate and use.
Yeah, I mean, we should even ask GPT if it can find this chart. It'd be interesting if it actually were capable of doing it. Maybe this is like the proof positive that something, can you find a timeline of human history as a graphic? Let's see what it does with that. Because that's ultimately now really very, sorry, I can't create graphics, but it gives you the text-based version of it. So I'll put this up for a second because I obviously got stumped here by Zoom failing, but let me show you what ChatGPT did with this textually. See, I didn't even know this was true. So he says, I'm sorry, I can't create graphics yet, right? You always put the word yet. Because it's
interesting.
I can provide text-based timeline of human history. 2.8 years ago, early humans. 1.7 million years ago, stone tools. 400,000 years ago, emergence of the early human species. 200,000 years ago, emergence of Homo sapiens. 50,000 years ago, modern humans migrate out of Africa. 12,000 years ago, development of agriculture. 4,000, the first cities. 3,500. First states, 2,500 years ago, first empires, 2,000 years ago, Christianity and the Roman Empire.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
1,400 years ago, Islam, 500 years ago, the Renaissance, 250 years ago, Industrial Revolution, 100 years ago, modern world marked by technological advancements, globalization.
Mm-hmm.
And, that they're missing is, like 50 years ago, because we would say modern computing is only really about, on the personal computer side, it's not even 50 years old on the main.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Right? So you can see the amplification even. I had a great graphic, but unfortunately. But it's quite a statement in a way, right? There's quite an ultimate statement there about we are accelerating at a super, super rapid pace. And it's something that's going to make a big difference.
My guess is, and I know there's a lot that goes into this, but as I look at those numbers, you think it would be safe to say that over the last 50 to 100 years, we've made more advancements in medicine, technology, et cetera, than over the previous thousands of years?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. People would say, we have done something that has been transformative and continues to be transformative.
Right.
And that transformation is going to continue for quite a lengthy or quite a fast, I'm bringing this up a different way and seeing if I can do it. But human history on their graphic, they only bring it back like 10,000 years. So the text-based one went even further back than that. So conceptually, you could say, well, it's kind of interesting. The scope of the question, I suppose, was maybe too broad or should have been different. But conceptually, so let me bring up this screen and see if it comes up this way. Sure enough, it came up that way. So
here you go.
Try again is the answer. So this is from Singularity University, which is the nonprofit in Silicon Valley that is very much studying this notion of at some point AI gets smarter than human beings, and that's considered the point of singularity, where essentially humans start to rely more on machines than they do on each other. And that point of singularity has a certain evolutionary effect, because you could argue maybe it's going to make us all lazy. It's like we don't do math anymore. We rely on VisiCalc. Well, VisiCalc is no longer around. It's been usurped first by 1, 2, 3, and then by Excel, and who knows who will usurp Excel, but Excel's had a really good run from Microsoft. So you can see it says American Revolution. I mean, agricultural revolution dates back, some 7,000 years before the start, really at the earliest existence of humans. And it goes forward to like the first city, the first mathematics. All this stuff is happening before we even get to modern age, right? This is like years ago.
That's amazing. So, one thing that pops into my mind as I look at this and think about this is all the advancements you just kind of touched on a little bit with but with all the medical advancements and medicine and technology and everything, then I would say this has changed us in a bad way, in my opinion, from a health perspective, all this evolution, because aren't we, and I'm not just blaming it on technology, but aren't we at this time the most overweight, obese, sick we got more mental health problems, heart attacks, diabetes, cancer than ever before?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I saw a statistic that said 70% of adult Americans, I don't know what it is for children, it's not a good number either, are overweight. And half of those, which means 35%, are obese. So
amazing.
1/3 of the adult working population is obese. 2/3 are overweight and or obese, which means only 1/3 are actually fit. I mean, that's a really bad statement about the difference between, say, when you had to go out and hunt for your food and when you had to go out and grow your food and when you had to, basically use a lot of manual labor. I mean, we don't do a lot of manual labor. Knowledge is not manual labor. Yeah, you type on a computer, but look, now you don't even need to type as much. Here is coming back with a lot of data, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow.
So you would say for the real estate industry and maybe specifically for the real estate lending industry, a lot of preliminary information can be obtained interactively, certainly through Google, we know that, but this assembles it in a readable fashion. Google gives you a lot of different websites, and then there's advertising, and there's a lot of noise, right?
Yeah,
right. Hope to get to the right place.
Right.
So this gives you more granularity, and presumably with enough specific questions, you can get to a much more narrow search. So maybe they go hand in hand, maybe they compete. I'm sure Google is going to want to use ChatGPT if ChatGPT really becomes like the go-to default, and they're going to want to integrate in some fashion the way in which you could argue Microsoft is doing with Bing, its own search engine that only has like 3% of the market. I think Google's got the other 97%. It's basically a duopoly between Google and Microsoft. You can't even say who the third search is. It used to be Yahoo, but Yahoo leverages off of other technology now, and it's owned by Verizon, which is a telephone company, a cell phone company. So
it is surprising that maybe they rested on their laurels, or they thought that anybody would never compete. But you'd think that Google, being the forefront runner in search, would have been all over this for the last several years. But maybe they thought they had it all already.
Well, I think that's part of it. And I think you could say that disruption happened. I mean, Google disrupted things, Tesla's disrupted things, Facebook's disrupted things. That's the point of this little ebook from Singularity University, which is this nonprofit, talks about you really need to have an exponential leader who's trying to disrupt his own organization. Basically, you could say that Steve Jobs, this is a graphic I wanted to put up, which is if you look at the way society is headed, the argument that Singularity is making is we're heading towards a path of abundance. Which is a positive statement. The literacy rate has more or less doubled or tripled over the last 100 years. The number of democracies has gone up almost 8 to 10-fold over the last 100 years. Life expectancy has gone up at least 50% over the last 100 years. And the population in poverty has gone down from 82% 100 years ago, meaning, in the 19...
That's remarkable.
To 9%, right? That's pretty remarkable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a statement that evolution is occurring in sort of a positive way, even as life expectancy increases and population increases. Because the thing about this chart that you miss the first time you see it, the first chart I put up, is that it has on the y-axis, the pink chart, take me a second to get to it, it has the number of people on Earth, the population in millions, right? So their point is we went from under 1 billion people, they would say almost zero. It wasn't really zero. I mean, I guess at some point it was zero when we were evolving from wherever we evolved from, to now I think we're more like over 8 billion.
I think so, worldwide, yeah.
Worldwide.
Yeah.
So you could see the multiplication of the population created more active thinking and more active minds that were collaborating with each other to create the telephone, the automobile, penicillin, DNA discovery, nuclear energy, PCs, internet, blah, 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 all these high-speed computers, all this stuff that played out after the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
Create the knowledge economy that we're in. And their point is, look at how fast this is over time. It's really roughly the last 50 years, if you think about it. Yeah. Really, there's an inflection point that happens probably at the point of the railroads and stuff that's happening that really is creating this second revolution, or this industrial revolution. That's sort of the beginning of the inflection point. So if you're studying human history, you'd say the prediction is it's going to accelerate even faster. And it's not going to stop. I mean, barring a war, a pandemic, which of course we've been through both wars and pandemics and survived them. I think we're surviving them. Or I guess this climate change problem, which could result in destruction of the Earth as we know it, or human species as we know it. Yeah. But barring nuclear war or some other disaster, a nuclear catastrophe, I guess, human history would predict that these innovations are going to continue. Yeah. And they're going to continue apace, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. Wow.
So maybe that spells good news, but your point is at the same time, we're getting fatter, we're getting more obese. We have more leisure time, but is it being spent doing the right things? But certainly from the point of view of knowledge work, we seem to be amplifying the knowledge worker, and those who learn these tools and get to use them effectively will do better and better over time compared to those who don't.
Right.
So that to me, that's all good news. I think the bad news is with this comes a certain creative destruction, which is a certain set of knowledge workers are going to be thrown out on the view that you can't provide what I can get when I use a tool like ChatGPT or a host of other AI amplified products and services.
Yeah, I mean, this is remarkable. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. It's too early, but in the next, 2 to 5 years, how we're going to look back and say what jobs have changed, what jobs were lost, what industries were affected. And this is going to start multiplying. This will be an interesting, because I think about, look at all these firms that are paid millions and millions and millions of dollars each year just to do research.
Right. Those research firms are going to worry. Right. Because some of the research is like low-hanging fruit that is available. And you could argue once stuff is posted on the internet without a paywall, right? I don't think ChatGPT is going to break through a paywall.
No, probably not.
Once that stuff, and there's a lot of it, it can be assembled. And there are people from a legal point of view, it's a separate topic, who are claiming, hey, this is taking advantage of a lot of copyrighted work that wasn't intended to be so leveraged without a royalty payment, almost like you get to use a snippet of music legally as a matter of fair use if it's less than, some people think it needs to be less than 8 seconds, some people think it needs a little more, a little less, just a snippet to kind of make a point, particularly if you're in the field of educating people. But this is taking probably a lot of information that might be traceable to underlying data. And the question is, how are you going to trace it? Because they don't give a source. They don't say we leveraged off of this website or that website or this website. They're treating it like it's all anonymous data and it's all in the public domain. But technically, it's not all in the public domain. So it puts a lot of pressure on fair use in the First Amendment.
Yeah. Hey, Jack, if someone's opening up a law firm today, are all those books going away?
The books have gone away a long time ago.
But when you walk into a law firm, that was always kind of the thing, right?
Yeah, it would look like this. It looked like a person with books in the background. That was our library. We had the complete federal reporting system, Fed 1, Fed 2, Fed 3. It was probably thousands of books.
And how much would that have cost a law firm annually to keep those books, or was it just a one-time expense? How does that?
It was West Publishing signed you up to like a 10-year contract where you paid like $2,000 a month. It was huge. It was a huge expense.
Wow.
And I remember at the time that we got the books, I had a partner, she's now deceased, Daryl Nelson, said, we can't be a respectable law office without having a law library.
Yeah.
I said, Daryl, that's a big expense. Why don't we just use Lexis? Lexis is too expensive and you can't really go through the book. So we went with her view on this. I ultimately regretted it because it was a very big expense. And you really couldn't charge it to a client. It was an overhead expense.
Yeah.
Whereas Lexis lets you allocate a session from a billing point of view to a client and charge them for the research if your firm does that. Some firms do, some firms don't. We generally don't do that. But in general, it's like being shackled with a big monthly bill for a bunch of books that you have to shelve, you have to get the dust off them. I mean, there's problems with books.
And it was just really a kind of a perceptional kind of marketing thing when someone walked in the office. That was the initial impression, or maybe that, wow, these guys have really, studied and did their homework and all that. I mean, it was just an image, I guess, right? I mean, is that what the whole premise was for that cost?
Right.
Yeah.
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 So it was image. In part, it still is image. There are definitely law firms that are still paying for these paper books. I think most of them are regretting it, but they have librarians. They have libraries. They have these big, typically glass walls because they want people to see the library when they give them a tour of the office. But, the truth is that, particularly with the pandemic, the work is being done virtually. And it's being done online, and clients don't want to go to an office and they want to see a library. They don't want to hear about that overhead. They see it as a cost. They don't see it as a gain. So to me, I think even the big firms are starting to get religion that says the books are just too expensive and they go out of date. So any tool that you have needs to be up to date. Even ChatGPT warns that its data was trained on the internet as it existed through December 31, 2021.
Oh, wow.
So it's more than 13 months.
Wow.
14 months out of date.
Interesting.
So if you had sold your podcast, I know you don't have any intention of doing it, but if you had sold it to somebody else, it would say, this is Joe Cucchiara's podcast. You'd say, well, whoever bought it would say, well, that's not accurate. I bought the podcast. Now I'm the host of it. So, you can see there's a lot of changes that happen. I mean, a lot of things that change over the last year, certainly. So it's got to become, and I think this is what they're doing with the paid version. They're saying, well, if you really want up-to-date information, you have to pay for it. and then we'll generate a subscriber base, and those will be the people that help us fund this. Makes sense, right?
I do the same thing. I think it's smart.
It's a tease. I mean, it's enough of a tease that, hey,
right.
It's got 40 plus years of data. You know, the last 1 year is valuable, but it's not the end of the world. You can still get a lot of information. And the place that I think is really very different, and most people don't understand, but there are examples that exist, it does the same thing for open source software. It actually can provide chunks of code for people that type in, you know, find me a subroutine that does fast sorting. It actually goes out and finds that code and brings that code back to the programmer. So it's like a librarian who's fetching information.
Interesting.
And apparently programmers love it, which is why Microsoft really wanted to have a close relationship and made the $1 billion investment at a $20 billion valuation. So Microsoft owns less than 5% of this company.
Wow.
Because they own GitHub. Microsoft owns GitHub, they own LinkedIn. So there's a lot of data in those silos called, you know, GitHub has all the software data, LinkedIn has all the resume data. There's a lot of ways of access, right? That become important. So I have to believe this is going to continue, particularly if Microsoft supercharges it. And
so, you know what I just thought of? It's just funny because, you know, I mean, when your mind's working, my mind's always working about stuff. Now, can you imagine? I don't know why I just thought of it. So you sit down and have a therapy session this way, right?
I think people are starting to imagine that. In fact, there was a film that was done on that. I forget the name of it, but it was like an emulation of a female therapist.
Oh, really?
With a guy. I'll find the name of the film.
Okay.
But it was really interesting. A lot of people said, wow, if that exists, I want it, because it enables a very private conversation. And I think there are people that are starting to believe that we will see that, particularly with VR, AR goggles. You know, if you're trying to get over an interpersonal problem, you can query it. And in fact, there are people that talk about getting ideas from ChatGPT about how to bring romance back to their relationship.
Wow.
So, you know, we can do that as the last little here, just to see where it takes us, because maybe it's going to take us in a funny place to end on. But
actually, what I should do is if I want to make more money, I should turn Real Estate Radio Live into some kind of dating service or something. Yeah, this is endless.
Well, I'm going to ask something that is a little bit pointed, but I'm going to do it anyway just to see what it does. I said, what is the best way to bring more romance into a long-term marriage?
Oh, there you go.
Let's see what it does with this, because this is what a lot of therapy is actually about. And I don't know what's going on here, but it's not showing me what it's doing. It looks like it's working on something, but can't see the screen. I'll put up what's here, and we can see if it bombed out because we waited too long, because it does time out.
Oh, okay. Maybe
if you don't ping it enough, it does eventually time out. Oh, here you go. What is the best way to bring more romance into a long-term marriage? Here are some tips to bring more romance into a long-term marriage. That's a complete sentence. Make time for each other. Okay, that makes sense. Keep things fresh. Find new experiences. Show affection. Write love notes. Rekindle intimacy.
Look at that.
Surprise each other. Share your feelings. Laugh together.
Yeah, there you go.
It takes effort. I mean, this is exactly what a therapist would say, and they would get paid like $300-400 an hour, right?
I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah, that's right.
Isn't that funny?
I love it. That's great.
I mean, I'm going to write one last thing just to show you the real power of this, because I did this with my wife and she was stunned. I said, I'm going to say, write a poem.
Oh, look at that. Interesting.
That I can give to my wife in our long-term marriage. in the style of Shakespeare.
Oh, look at that. Wow.
How would you give that to a knowledge worker and ask them to do it? I mean, they would be like, Shakespeare, a particularly young kid. Who's Shakespeare? Who is that?
They'd sit out for 16 hours of research and the whole thing.
Can you imagine? I mean, it would be like, really, Shakespeare? How did he enter the picture? But so look at what it does. My dearest love, my heart's pure flame.
That's amazing.
Joy that feeds my name. Is this the journey we embark? We, thee, my love, no fear or dark. With every moment thou dost show the grace, the strength that thou doth bestow.
Oh, that's
love
amazing.
that grows with every year and soars on wings to reach the sphere. I mean, you can't beat this.
And most people, if you gave this to them, they go, "Oh my God, this is remarkable. Where'd you come up with this?"
And there are people that are, is it plagiarism? Because I did come up with the right question to ask, but you'd say my question was pretty generic. I mean, I didn't really load it. I just said long-term marriage, write a poem I can give to my wife. So there's a female in our long-term marriage in the style of Shakespeare. Okay, and now you could say, we could see what it does if we ask the same question, a poem for my new date. It probably wouldn't be as detailed, but who knows? But it has my darling wife, very essence of my life. I mean, obviously, there's good wording here, right?
Yeah, the thing and there's a million things going to come to my mind, but just in this short series that we're talking about here, the other thing that comes to mind is, how about these people that are getting paid subscription fees to write blogs and updates and on topics, and
they're all getting laid off. They're all getting laid off, Joe.
No, but one would say, like, why would I? And not a judgment as much as an observation. Why would I pay a subscription fee for some guy that says, I'm going to give you a blog once a week on real estate?
Right. You wouldn't.
Right.
You would start to say, I can get that done, except you don't know if there's going to be some type of blowback from a copyright point of view, right? Because there's
can you sell? I guess the other question comes from a legal perspective. Anything that comes from this, I guess, how do you know it comes from that? And the person can't turn around so let's just say, right, I'm a big author or guy on whatever I do, and I'm using a ton of this data now and posting it on my website and talking about it on my podcast, and I have a $150 subscription fee per month because of how much wonderful data I have. Am I actually stealing information, or is that already out there, so does it matter?
People believe that the fair use doctrine, which is a protection against infringement lawsuits under the Federal Copyright Act, will provide protection, at least for personal use that's non-commercial.
I see.
So, love letter to your wife, that sort of thing. Of course, Shakespeare is in the public domain because that dates back, 500 years ago. 400 years ago. I mean, basically, it's too old for any copyright to exist. But there is arguably other sources that are more recent that might be trained on for generating the poetry or any answer.
Right.
And the issue is traceability. How are you going to show that there's both access and substantial similarity? Those are the tests that have to be hurdled. And, you can also show what's sometimes called striking similarity, where it's identical. Mm-hmm. Like, that's probably to some degree why it's not touching graphics, because it's easier to trace where the graphics come from.
Right.
And people would say, well, those graphics were not authorized to be generated and shown by your tool. But you'd say, well, then provide a link to the graphics, just the link.
Right.
They provided a link to your show, you welcome that. That's another form of marketing for you.
Right.
So there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of equations, and obviously the world evolves in a way that creates greater abundance. So this is another form of abundance. Some people think knowledge work is heading to zero in cost, and therefore maybe knowledge work has got to really become far more expansive over time. Or far more specialized over time. I don't think you would go to ChatGPT if you had a serious medical condition.
Yeah, right.
You might get some preliminary information that would help you ask the right questions once you get in front of the doctor. I don't think you would buy a fixed rate loan through ChatGPT, even if it offered advertising. I think you'd say, the advice is get a licensed professional like you,
right.
And have that person really provide the detailed recommendation based on the specific circumstance of the client. Same thing for law. I mean, the same thing for psychotherapy, ultimately, although you could say maybe someone can make a lot of headway with this interactive system in all these.
Amazing. Wow.
Wait, Joe, why don't you tell people how they can reach you? Because you're the go-to man, not ChatGPT. I'm actually securing.
This is fascinating stuff. This is really fascinating.
You thought I was going to bore you today.
Yeah, no, this is. I could do this for 8 hours. No, this is fascinating stuff, and I hope people get a lot of education and information. Yeah, to reach out, anything on real estate, lending, need for financial services, any of that, CPA, we do all that. We have a group of partnerships to help with all those factors. So area code 408-838-9060. Again, that's area code 408-838-9060, or you could always email Joe at RE Radio Live. Again, that's Joe at RE Radio Live. And also for those that are, we'll talk just briefly about, or give them the information about Bundle Select. Go to bundleselect.com, bundleselect.com. So right along with the information that Jack and I are talking about today is bundleselect.com. So we partner with corporations to offer their employees a discount on real estate services, buying, selling, refinancing, relocation. So if you're a employee, this would benefit you, or if you're a company running an HR or benefits division, that would help you as well.
I mean, you could see where ChatGPT could theoretically become the front end to a Bundle Select backend, where the interaction is happening to probe the data that makes its way into the Bundle Select system. And you could see how that could go, right?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's fascinating. This is great information. It'll be exciting to see where we are months and years from now.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.